Alright guys, what's up? In this video I'm going to talk about the offense versus defense arms race that's pretty much been going on in security, and I definitely think this is something that might not ever end, really. So a lot of this, when I'm talking about the arms race between offense and defense, it's kind of between defense, like the blue team and the red team. You know, if you're familiar with that terminology, basically the red team, they're the attackers. They're the guys that are simulating the adversary. In organizations, the reason they hire them is because they want to see what an attacker would find before actually getting exploited and being in a really terrible situation, right? They'd rather have their own guys that are trying to do this stuff constantly. That way they can let them know, and then they can remediate the vulnerabilities before a real exploit happens, right? So the blue team, they do the opposite. So they're like the defense. They try to monitor the network for any kind of stuff that might raise an eyebrow, I guess you could say. And definitely if they find anyone that has breached the network or any of the systems, then they try to, they raise the alarm and try to lock them down and make sure they can minimize the damage. And then there's also a team that will, after the damage happens, they'll go in and see what was done, right? But that's sort of another thing. The sort of arms race that I'm speaking of, it's kind of between the antivirus, the blue team that has like the antivirus and stuff like that, versus the adversaries that are creating the exploits, the payloads and stuff like that. So, if you're familiar with sites like virustotal.com, what you can do there is you can submit payloads. They'll tell you if there's a signature for it, but the catch is that it'll actually add that signature to their database. So that way the good guys, the blue team guys, can have that signature available, and they'll know they can add it to their database and improve their antivirus product, that if they see that signature again used on a system that they're protecting, they're safeguarding, that way they can raise the alarm like this is a virus, right? That's how signatures work, basically. So there is one example of the arms race, right? Because you have the hackers, whether they're gray hat, white hat, black hat, they're the ones creating these exploits, and they might even be red team guys creating these exploits, trying to do whatever they want to do with the exploited services, right? They'll have tools out there to help not only guys that are looking to do things for malicious intent, but mainly to help, as well, to help, pen testers, to help red teamers and stuff like that. They'll have tools maybe it's just a recon tool. Maybe it's a tool that sort of exploits a weakness in a protocol to gather information on the target system, right? Maybe it's an SMB tool that will tell you what operating system's running, what version, what service pack, stuff like that. And then you have the blue team, which they're trying to, any of the exploits, they're going to try to flag it, especially if it's like something running on the system. That's more so, I guess, the context, not really anything against like Nmap or stuff like that. It's mostly things that are running on the server and stuff like that. Payloads though too, right? Say I have an exploit. Say I'm running a service on port 1000 and it's vulnerable to maliciously crafted HTTP packets, right? And I craft a malicious packet, and in the vulnerable field, I put my payload to get the shell, and I generated that through MSF Venom, right? With some of their encodings with however many iterations, right? Well, pretty much all of the Metasploit stuff is pretty well noted that it's Metasploit at this point. Like every single antivirus vendor makes pretty darn sure that they cover at least all the Metasploit stuff. So chances are my payload's going to get flagged if there's an antivirus running on the system. A lot of times, a lot of these companies nowadays, they like to use McAfee and stuff like that. So that'll get flagged pretty much every time. But, now, there's probably, this isn't really my area. I'm not an exploit writer kind of guy. I'm more of like the pen tester, but I'm sure there's been a lot of other tools that have come out in the future, or like in recent times, that have basically been like different ways to encode things. And I know for sure the blue team has been very diligent on figuring out what those signatures are, so they can flag them as malicious if they're known to be used, in exploits and stuff like that. So that's just something to keep in mind. There's very much an arms race going on when it comes to this stuff. So you almost have to be, if you really need stealth as an attacker nowadays, you almost have to be like really on the forefront with this stuff, really in the weeds, or at least have some pretty reliable tools that are kind of underground and not really that mainstream. So there's like a whole culture to this, right? It's really interesting if you guys get into security to see like the culture of like the offensive guys versus the defensive guys. Because even in a white hat environment, there's still almost that kind of rivalry between the offensive guys and the defensive guys. Now, with that being said, they still come together and they still make sure the company is safer and stuff like that. But there's still that culture, like they want their tools to work, and they want to be on the cutting edge because these blue team guys are keeping them honest too. So yeah, very interesting for sure. And yeah, this is just the sort of current landscape with all this stuff. And let me know if you have any questions in the comment section below, and I'll make sure they get answered, and I'll see you guys in the next one.